Rabbi Say, Shalom Aleichem. We're going to talk a little a famous Inyan. Part of the Inyan is famous, part of it is not so famous. The Shartzian in Hilchos Chanukah, this part is famous. The Shartzian says that if somebody doesn't have an opportunity to say, to light the menorah any days of Chanukah, there's a good svara that he says that one should at least on the last day of Chanukah, when one knows one's not going to be making hadlakas neiros, one should make a שהחיינו not on the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, but on the day, because the day of Chanukah is also a Yom Tov, and we know that the halacha is that you make a bracha a שהחיינו even without kiddush. The Gemara says man mevarach afil b'shuk. So there's no kiddush, but you should still make a שהחיינו. That's the Shartzian. There's also a Bi'alacha in Hilchos Megillah, the same thing. And the Shartzian says it on his own, and he brings it to Meiri says that. In Bi'alacha in Hilchos Megillah, he says the same thing. He says it on his own. He says it from the Maruk Tzia, from the Yavitz. And the Yavitz says, the Paiskim are talking about if one should make a bracha, if one should make a שהחיינו on the day, Kriya, when already made at night, so maybe one shouldn't make another שהחיינו a day. And the Paiskim discuss it, the mitzvah of the day is the Iker, because the night is only midrabanan, the day is the Kabbalah, different svaras. And the Maruk Tzia says he doesn't understand it, and he says that anyway, one should make a שהחיינו on the day itself, because the day itself is a Yom Tov, and the Iker Yom Tov is in the day, and one should make a שהחיינו out Purim itself. And he says, but you don't have a kais. He says, we know that zman loy boy kais, because I'm rafil b'shuk. So Mamela, you make a bracha. We should make a bracha a שהחיינו even on Purim, even though there's no kais. And he brings a raya. He says Yom Kippur we make a שהחיינו. There's no achila and shtia. There's only shvisa and menucha, and you make a שהחיינו. So Purim should be the same thing. And Mr. Bura is a very, very supportive of this svara. And the Mr. Bura even says that maybe even the Magen Avram holds of it. That's the Mr. Bura, the Shartzi, and the Bi'alacha. The Shaila is so good. That's a hara. The Mr. Bura that brings that the Meiri holds like that. The Meiri holds like that by Chanukah, and he says Mastama Huadim, but Purim also the same thing. The problem is, and it's Yidua in the Welt, that the Meiri himself in Megillah is Seiser himself. That means the Meiri in Shabbos says that it's right to make a bracha, to make a שהחיינו on the day itself of Chanukah. But in Megillah he says no. When Asvar Pashat he says one doesn't make a שהחיינו on the day of Chanukah itself, and who is in the day of Purim. And I'll read out the lashon. The Meiri is talking about again the same shaila on Purim. Should you make a שהחיינו again by the day, or it's only at night? Once you made a שהחיינו at night, you don't make another שהחיינו at day. And the Meiri says, he brings that some say that by day you should make a bracha, not out the Megillah, but out the Yom. The Yom itself requires a bracha. And the Meiri is not happy with that. The Meiri says, Makom makom ein divreim klum, shakol she'ein sham kais l'kiddush ein b'zman. If there's no kais, there's no zman. That's Meiri. And he says, V'al teshiveni mi Yom Kippur. Are you going to ask for Yom Kippur? He says, Yom Kippur is no raya. He says, because shekdushasa yisera v'loi nifka kaisai ela mitzad isa shtia shabai. He says, Yom Kippur really is chashuv enough to require kiddush. We don't require kiddush because it's so halik that you can't make kiddush on Yom Kippur. But it's not because of a lack of chashivas. But a Yom Tov which doesn't deserve kiddush, doesn't get a שהחיינו. That's Meiri. And he says, and he says, it's like Chanukah. Chanukah, nobody thought of making a bracha, a שהחיינו, on the day of Chanukah. You make a bracha on the hadlaka. Purim is the same thing. You make a bracha on the Mikra Megillah, but one doesn't make a bracha on the day itself. So the Meiri is Seiser himself in Megillah. From Megillah to Shabbos. In Shabbos, he says that it's a svara to make a שהחיינו on the day of Chanukah, and in Megillah he says as a svar pshuta, he just brings as a raya. He says nobody thought of making a שהחיינו on Chanukah. Who didn't Purim one doesn't make a שהחיינו. Okay, that's okay. So he says that one needs a more chash of a day, But what the Meiri does say is that one only makes the Shechianu on a day that there's Kiddush. And he says, Yom Kippur, there's no Kiddush. Yeah, that's because Yom Kippur is too hailig to have Kiddush. But otherwise, it would be a Shechianu. So this is directly opposite of the Maraktzia. The Maraktzia says that it's a svara that one should make on Purim. Why? Because you don't need Kiddush. It's man oima fil b'shuk. It's a mefurish Gemara. It doesn't need Kiddush. So the Meiri and the Maraktzia don't go together. But the real kasha is that what's the Meiri talking about? L'chayr, the Maraktzia is right. Zman mevarach al fil b'shuk. There's no way to say that Zman, that the bracha of Shechiyanu is a contingent on the kais. There's no and the Maraktzia brings a raya. You see that there's Shechiyanu and Yom Kippur, and which is really a discussion in the Gemara and Erevin if you could bring a raya from Yom Kippur, and the Meiri says it's no raya from Yom Kippur because Yom Kippur deserves kiddush. It's just one can't eat, one can't drink, but the Maraktzia did bring a raya from over there. But what's the Meiri talking about? L'chayra, the Maraktzia is right. Kiddush has nothing to do with Shechiyanu. Shechiyanu is man oima filu b'shuk. So I want to say another ha'ara. The ha'ara is that the Gemara says that Zman, the bracha of Shechiyanu, one could make even in the street, meaning even without a kais, and even if it's not the first day of Yom Tov, all 7 days of Yom Tov one could say Zman. So I saw ha'ara like this. The Rambam's shita is that somebody who sees haroya pri hameschadash mishana l'shana, if somebody sees a pri chadash, so everybody knows we make a Shechiyanu. But the Rambam has two extra words. The Rambam says haroya pri hameschadash mishana l'shana betchilas riyasai. It's only initially, but afterwards one doesn't make. And the Paiskim say that according to the Rambam, if one doesn't make a bracha right away, one loses the bracha. That's the Rambam Shita. Magen Avraham in Reish Chavei says that the Rambam is dafka tchilas riyasai, not afterwards. We don't hold like that. The Shulchan Aruch holds it has nothing to do with tchilas riyasai. We wait for to eat it. But according to the Rambam, it's betchilas riyasai and only tchilas riyasai. So I saw somebody has a shaila that if it's only tchilas riyasai, so what's pshat that we're making a Shechiyanu on Yom Tov if one forgets or one leaves it out the first day? One does it all 7 days. Well, all 7 days. It's not tchilas riyasai. His chachis is gone. The Rambam holds it has to be mamish, exactly fresh. Otherwise one doesn't make a bracha. Now one could be mechalik. It's not really exactly daima. One could, but I'm just saying over the ara because I want to lead to something else. The Rishonim talk in Sukkot Menvav and other places. There's a big arichas in Rishonim. What mitzvah warrants a Shechiyanu and what mitzvah doesn't warrant a Shechiyanu? We make Shechiyanu on certain mitzvahs and not on other mitzvahs. Why? Pedin Ben, Mila, different mitzvahs. Which mitzvah deserves a Shechiyanu and which not? And the Rishonim go and matriach all different svaras to be mechalik one from another. The Rishonim don't mention, and the Rishonim talk about we make a Shechiyanu on Shofar and we make a Shechiyanu on Lulav, but they don't mention the fact that why do we make a Shechiyanu on Rosh Hashanah? Why do we make a Shechiyanu on Yom Kippur? Why do we make a Shechiyanu on Sukkot? Why do we make a Shechiyanu on Pesach and Shavuos? They don't discuss that. Well, what? They don't discuss in that question. They don't throw in also. So if Shofar deserves, why does Shofar? Why does Rosh Hashanah? All the Shechiyanus on Yom Tov they admit they don't discuss. So I want to explain as follows, just a gather of what the Shechiyanu on Yom Tov is about. There's a Gemara in Erevin Daf Mem Amid Beis, which is really the source, the shirish of the whole sugya of Shechiyanu on Yom Tov. One of the shrashim. The Gemara says, Rabbi said that when we were by Rav Huna, we had a shaila. Should one say Shechiyanu on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? We do. We make a Shechiyanu, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. Everybody knows the second night we have a shaila if we need to, so we take a Pri Chadash. But we make a Shechiyanu, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur. The Gemara had a shaila about it. Do we say Kivan the Mizman Lizman Asa Amrina? Do we say, well, it's Mizman Lizman, it's something which is infrequent. It's Mizman Lizman, you make a Berachas Lizman. Oidilma Kivan the Le'ikru Regalim, since Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur don't have the status of Regalim, Le'amrina. We don't say Shechiyanu. Now, what does Regalim have to do with anything? That's a big puzzle. What exactly is the Gemara referring to? Maybe it has to do with Simcha, that Shalosh Regalim are times of Simcha, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is not Simcha. The Gemara doesn't say. The Gemara just says it's totally Regalim. We're not going to discuss it. There's a Marsha in the end of Megillah, one of the last Marshas of Megillah. Marsha says that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, he says that even though the Yom Tov comes only once a year, but the concept is throughout the year. To do tshuva is all year. So maybe it's not such a chiddush. Maybe you shouldn't make a Shachianu. The other Yom Tovim, it's a seasonal thing. Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Pesach. So you make a Shachianu. But Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, it's maybe it doesn't deserve a Shachianu. It's something a person should be Isaac in the whole year. That's a Marsha. But Kapshut of the Gemara, it's Sarchi and Sarchi what the Gemara is saying. But we're not going to discuss that. But the Gemara is a Shaila if a Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur deserve a Shachianu because they're not Regala. And the Gemara brings a brisa. The brisa says ten chelak l'shiva v'gam l'shmoina. That the Gemara says that a riboy that gam is marba, shiva is shiva yimei pesach, shmoina is shmoina yimei chag, is sukkos, and then it says gam l'shmoina, it's marba Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur also and Shavuos. So the Gemara thought it meant that you make a bracha shechianu on those days, and the Gemara says no, you don't make a shechianu, it means something else. And the Gemara says, I'll prove it to you that it doesn't mean Shechianu, because how could it be that you're going to make a Shechianu all 7 days? You don't have Shechianu all 7 days of Sukkot. You don't have. It says 10 chelik Shiva v'gam l'shmoina. Shiva you may Pesach, Shmoina you may Sukkot. You're not making a Shechianu all 7 or all 8 days. It must be we're not talking about Shechianu. So the Gemara says no. It's talking about somebody who left out the Shechianu the first day, so he makes it the second day. The Gemara says that can't be. If you omitted Shechianu the first day, you're not going to make it second day. You don't have a kais. You need a kais for Shechianu. So the Gemara says no. You don't need a kais for Shechianu. It's a raya to Rav Nachman who says man oimer afilu b'shuk. You don't need a kais for Shechianu. Then the Gemara. So we don't know maskana. So does Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur need a kais? Not. Maybe it doesn't need Shechianu. Does it not? We wanted to bring a raya from the fact that it says ten chelik l'shiva gam l'shmoina that Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are included, and we said it's not referring to Shechianu. We thought to prove that it's not referring to Shechianu because how could one say that there's 7 or 8 days of Shechianu? And then we say no, there could be 7 and 8 days of Shechianu if one forgot it, if one left it out, if one didn't have a kais on the first day, one makes it on the other days. The Gemara's maskana is, the Gemara says, so what's the halacha? Do we make a Shechianu or don't we make a Shechianu? So the Gemara says the Rabbanan sent Rav Yemer Saba to go to Rav Chizda on Erev Rosh Hashanah and see what he does. Ma'aser Rav, let's see what he does. So the Gemara says Rav Chizda understood that he was coming to check up something. He knew that he was coming to spy on some halacha. All of a sudden he showed up Kiddush time. And but Lamais is what Rav Chizda did was that they brought him a kais of wine, and he made kiddush, and he said zman on shechianu, and he said shechianu. So you see that we make a shechianu even in Rosh Hashanah. That's a maskana of the Gemara. So I have a kasha. I don't think I ever saw anybody answer kasha. The Gemara says earlier. The Gemara says, do we make a shechianu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? Do we not make a shechianu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? It's not regolim, but maybe we make a shechianu anyway. So the Gemara says, I don't really understand the shaila. The Gemara says they came to Rav Yehuda, and Rav Yehuda says there's no shaila. I make shechianu on fresh fruits, new fruits also. So of course, why would Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur be different than a fresh fruit? If you can make it, it's not a regal. But a fresh fruit is a mesamech. So if you make a shechianu on a fresh fruit, you can make a shechianu on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur also. So the Gemara responded. It's not a raya. Rava responded, it's not a raya. Avadi, you can make a bracha on a fresh fruit, on a new fruit, a new for the new season. But the bracha that one makes on the new fruit is only a rishus. It's not a chayva. There's no obligation, and that's halacha. The Mishabur says that these brachas are not a chayva, it's just a rishus. It's a mitzvah, but it's not a chayva. So of course, if you want, you can make a bracha on a birchas shechianu on Rosh Hashanah. It's no problem. But the question is it a chiyuv to make a shechianu? And that you tell me that you can make a bracha even on a new fruit. So why is Rosh Hashanah different? Yeah, it's exactly the same. My question is it like a fruit that it's only a rishus, or it's actually a chayva to make a bracha on shechianu like on the other Yom Tovim? So I have a tremendous kasha. The kasha is like this. So what's the Gemara's maskana? The Gemara had a maskana that Rav Chizda, they went to Rav Chizda's house and they saw that Rav Chizda made shechianu on Kiddush and Rosh Hashanah. So we got it. You make a Shechiyanu on Kiddush and Rosh Hashanah. It's no raya. Maybe he made a Shechiyanu as a rishus, just like one can make a Shechiyanu. Many people make Shechiyanu on Tu B'Shvat because they're eating fresh fruit, new fruits from a new season, whatever it is that they didn't have. So they make a Shechiyanu. But the whole shayla of the Gemara wasn't if one made. The Gemara's shayla was if one must. Do we have to make Shechiyanu or don't we have to make a Shechiyanu? So what's the Gemara talking about? We'll bring a raya from Rav Chizda. The Rav Chizda made Shechiyanu on Rosh Hashanah. So you see that what Rosh Hashanah needs. No, Rosh Hashanah doesn't need, but Rosh Hashanah when made. That the Gemara seems to have no question.
Is it derisa?
What? It's a good question. It's a good question. It's probably won't be hefsek, but it's a good time. It probably wouldn't be hefsek. It's negay other things. It probably wouldn't be hefsek. If it's rishus, it probably wouldn't be hefsek, but it could be half a time.
Kiddush b'leil is derisa. Yantiv or
Okay, but not shechiyan, not the shechiyan.
Shechiyan is piggyback, is riding on. Once you make the kiddush on the kois,
but
it's chalois, it's chal on the kois. So then once it's chal on the kois.
But we're not. But you wouldn't be mechuyev. You wouldn't be mechuyev. That means we're trying to figure out if you're mechuyev or you're not mechuyev.
And according to Arab and Mem, Daf Mem, that you would be able to make a limit from that.
You couldn't.
Right. If you have it available. If it's available, even if it's available.
Of the second night.
Right.
We'll explain it after.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's a simple question. What you're saying is a possibility. It's not so pashut it would be a hefsek. And the emphasis that the Rishonim, nobody speaks that out. If that would be the pshat, then they should speak out that it's really a technical problem as hefsek. But it's very possible it wouldn't be hefsek. If somebody, I'm going to ask you a shayla, this is not so pashut. What is the halacha when you make a shechiyanu on a fruit? Is it a hefsek or it's not a hefsek? It's not pashut. That means that if
it's not a hefsek because on the tzad it's for a new fruit, it should have been a hefsek.
every right, the second night. It's not pashut. It's not pashut. It's not pashut. Okay. But Kirzner, so let's continue. Let's continue. So I'm gonna just suggest the pshat in the Gemara is like this. The pshat in the Gemara is again. So we have a shayla. The Gemara is a shayla if one makes a shechiyanu on Rosh Hashanah or not. And the Gemara says, what's the big deal? You can make even on a new fruit. And the Gemara's answer is, Avadi could make it. The question is if one must. So then what's the Gemara's raya from Rav Chizda who made a bracha shechiyanu? He made it, but where you still don't see that you must. So the shayla is like this. First of all, I want to ask a simple shayla. The Gemara has a discussion over here in Eruvin. It's also a Gemara in Sukkot of Mem Zayin. The Gemara has a discussion whether somebody whether it's mutter to make shechiyanu without a kais or needs a kais. The Gemara has a kasha. How could it be that tein chelak l'shiva v'gam l'shmayna is referring to shechiyanu? You don't have a kais all 7 days of Sukkot, or all 8 days of all 8 days of Sukkot, or 7 days of Pesach. So the Gemara says it's talking about if you have a kais. So the Gemara eventually says that zman mavarach afil b'shuk, that one doesn't need a kais. Why was Gemara thinking that one needs a kais for shechiyanu? L'chayra, it's a pella. Shechiyanu, if somebody makes a shechiyanu on a new fruit, nobody thought of having a kais. Somebody makes a shechiyanu on shayfer and lulav, nobody thought of having a kais. So why was the Gemara thinking that the shechiyanu and yom tov needs a kais?
You have something that's bichol and a chepsa.
Okay, so let me say this. It's a good question. You have a day. The day requires a kais, and you make a bracha on the day requires shechiyanu. You make a bracha on the day. Why was the Gemara adamant that one needs a kais? Until the Gemara said no. Zman name him Rav Nachman. The Rav Nachman says it's man mavarach afil b'shuk. What's it sad otherwise? Why shouldn't it? This is really a good question. So it's kedai to mention over here Rabbeinu Chananel. The lashon of Rabbeinu Chananel in Eruvin is Rabbeinu Chananel says the lashon of Rabbeinu Chananel is that the Gemara said tein chelak l'shiva v'gam l'shmayna. The Gemara thought it meant shechiyanu. Ma'alav hani kulu ikar lekadesh oisei bizman. Lekadesh oisei bizman. So Rabbeinu Chananel says that the concept of shechiyanu by Yom Tov is lekadesh oisei bizman. And what he seems to be saying is like this. it's not only connected with Kiddush. That could be also, but the idea is like this. There's the Baruch of Zman on Yom Tov. Again, we asked before that the Rishonim have a big arichas, which mitzvah requires a Shechianu, which mitzvah doesn't require Shechianu, and they don't discuss why do all the Yom Tovim require Shechianu. It's not even part of the discussion. But the answer is, according to Rabbeinu Chananel, the answer is because the Shechianu on Yom Tov is a total different Shechianu. When we make a Shechianu on a mitzvah, we're making Shechianu, it's something which brings Simcha. The Rishonim say some mitzvahs do bring Simcha, some mitzvahs don't bring Simcha, and they go to great length explaining why this one does, this one doesn't, why Lulav does. It's very schwer. But Shechianu on Yom Tov is on mitzvahs is like Shechianu on a Pri Chadash. It's something that makes me happy. I make a Shechianu. But Shechianu on Yom Tov is really a total different. It's to give chashivas to the day. In order to give chashivas to the day, it's Yom Tov. We say Shechianu v'kimanu azman hazeh. It's not because it's something that makes us happy. It's a day that's the day that that's worthy of being commemorated by saying Shechianu. It's a way of being mekadesh yom bezman, like the Rabbeinu Chananel says. You're saying this is a special day. How do we say this is a special day? By saying Shechianu v'kimanu v'giyanu azman hazeh. So that's number one. Shabbos, because it comes too often. It comes too often, but it has to have some elements of things. The Rishonim even talk about Shabbos. It's not so partial, but Shabbos one can make a Shechianu. But when one does make a Shechianu on Yom Tov, it's not because like Shofar and Lulav that it's a mitzvah that brings Simcha, and the Rishonim go to explain why does it bring Simcha. The Shechianu on the day is a different concept. It's okay. That could also be. But the Rishonim talk. Right, good. But the Rishonim talk. But no. But his hour was that if it's not al simcha, if it's al zman, so if it's al zman, so the answer is that no, but it's a tzira for both things together. But the aside of kiddush of Shechianu on Yom Tovim is a chashivas for the day. In the Gemara, it's always called Bרכת Azman. It's Bרכת Azman because it's a bracha. Shechianu regular has nothing to do with Zman. Shechianu is Shechianu. You make a Shechianu Pri Chadash. But this is on Yom Tov. It's Bרכת Azman, and that's why the Gemara thought, and that's why the Gemara held that one needs a kais. One needs a kais because it's like Kiddush, just like Kiddush Hayom needs a kais. So too Shechianu on Yom Tov needs a kais. And the Gemara, the Gemara says it doesn't, but the Gemara brings it's not a davar pashut in the Gemara. It's not a davar pashut in the Gemara. There's a taisvus in Sukkah, Daf Mem Vav, that the Gemara in Sukkah Daf Mem Vav says it's a famous taisvus that the Gemara says that somebody who makes a Sukkah makes a Shechianu b'shas asiyah. When he sits down in the Sukkah, he says Shechianu b'shas v'tzvan leisha b'Sukkah. Somebody who is using an old Sukkah, when he sits down in the Sukkah, he makes a Shechianu and he makes a leisha b'Sukkah. That's the Gemara. Frek taisvus, somebody who sits down in the Sukkah, he should also make two brachas. He's making a bracha Shechianu al Yom Tov, and he's making a leisha b'Sukkah al Sukkah. So the Gemara says that if a person uses if the person makes a Sukkah, he makes a Shechianu b'shas asiyah, and he makes a leisha when he sits. And if a person's using a prefabricated a Sukkah that was made earlier, then he makes two Shechianus. In fact, everybody should make a Shechianu on Sukkahs anyway because the Yom Tov itself requires a bracha. So Tosfos says, which is a very famous Tosfos says that on the bracha that we make on the Asiyas HaSukkah is enough to cover the Zman also. That means we're making a bracha on Asiyas HaSukkah even though it's before Yom Tov. But since Asiyas HaSukkah is connected to the Yom Tov of Sukkahs, so therefore it covers the bracha Shechianu on Yom Tov also. That's Tosfos. So that's a chiddush, but that's what Tosfos holds. But what Tosfos adds is a davar pella. Tosfos says, like you see in the Gemara, he says that because you don't have to make a Shechianu on Yom Tov itself, because he says you see in the Gemara that Zman Omer Afilu B'Shuk, you could make Shechianu all throughout Yom Tov. So that's a pella. It's a pella. It's a pella. So Tosfos says that since you see that you can make Shechianu after the first day of Yom Tov, we're not makbid that you say it on Yom Tov, you can make it afterwards. So too, for the same reason, you can make Shechianu before Yom Tov, and it's good enough to cover Yom Tov. So it's a pella. What's the dimion? If you make a Shechianu before Yom Tov, if you make a Shechianu on Yom Tov, it's Yom Tov. The chiddush is really just that you don't need a kais, but otherwise it's yantiv. There's no problem with making shechiyanu. Mashen kain a shechiyanu before yantiv. That's a big chiddush. What does one have to do with this man? It's a pelamam. But the way we're explaining the way we're explaining the inyan of shechiyanu, it's really understood. The inyan of shechiyanu is really me'ein kiddush hayom. And Taisus holds that really, you see from the Gemara that the Gemara held you need a kais. And the Gemara held that you don't have a kais. The Gemara says the second day there is no kais. What is the Gemara thinking? The Gemara held that there is no kais because you don't warrant a kais. Since you don't warrant a kais, it's not going to help to have a kais. The Gemara says, no, okay, you could take a kais. But the Gemara is mavur that really, Shechiyanu and Yom Tov really belongs on the first day. It belongs on the first day because it belongs to be part of Kiddush. And since it belongs to be part of Kiddush, Taisa says, you see that your yaitza with Shechiyanu, you say afterwards, as long as it's still Yom Tov, you could tailgate, you could connect to Yom Tov. But it's not the real thing. The real thing is on Kiddush Hayom. So Taisa says, well then you can make a Shechiyanu before Sukkot, b'shas asiyah. It's still a chayra, not daima mamish. But that's what Taisa seems to be saying. Taisa seems to be saying that the bracha of Shechiyanu that one makes throughout Yom Tov really doesn't belong in Yom Tov. And the Gemara really, you know what the Gemara was talking about when the Gemara said that the Zman needs a kais, and really it belongs on the kais of the first day of Sukkot, the first day of Sukkot, first day of Pesach. Now I don't want to be marich on this thing, but the emes is that the Gemara says that the Gemara says in Sukkot of Memvav that the Amiroim Lamaisa, they didn't make a Shechiyanu when they made the Sukkah, they did it on the kais. So the question is it dafka on the kais or not on the kais? The Rosh says, well, you see that the Amiram didn't do it b'shas asiyah. They waited to do it on the kais. Who didn't lulav? We don't make a shechiyanu b'shas asiyah. We wait to do it until we don't do it when we put it together. We make the shechiyanu only when one shakes the lulav on the first day. But the Rambam doesn't say that, and I'm not going to be marich now. But the Rambam is mashma. I know that it's only by sukkah, because sukkah it says you should do it on the kais. The point is not that you should do it b'shas asiyah. The point is that we want the shechiyanu of sukkahs to be on the kais. The Gemara says that mavarach ala kais. Since we want it to be on a kais, therefore we pushed it off until then. But lulav, where there is no kais, there's no reason to push it off, and it will be just as good to do b'shas asiyah. This is an inyan aruch which we won't be marich on.
And yet Nashim will mavarach shechiyanu at the time of lighting. Prisham the Drisha, this in Puk Chazi, the Ashkenazi women that do light, and they say shechiyanu.
That's a good question. It's a very good. That's right. But that's a very good question. That according to what?
Really wait for the husband.
But I'm going to tell you answer. So you're asking a very good question. You're saying that according to what we're saying, definitely the Iker's man of Shechiyanu is by the Kais. So why do it early? It's a very good question. I want to just tell you that the whole Shechiyanu by Hadlakas Neiris is not pashut at all. And our minig, which the Paiskim say, is that we allow women to do it because it's not worse. It's not worse than making a Shechiyanu on the day. But they're really the Iker minig of saying Shechiyanu for women. It was on the mitzvah of Hadlakas Neiris. So in the mitzvah of Hadlakas Neiris, we only allow it. We look away from it because we say, okay, nishkafarlich. It's like our from. Okay, so we got to finish. We got to finish. So basically, now let's go. We understand now why the shechiyanu. We asked the kasha in the beginning that if we're making a shechiyanu on Yom Tov all 7 days, either Rambam is mashma that if one misses the first instant, one can't make a bracha. A pre chadash, if one misses the first instant, one can't make a shechiyanu. But the answer, one cannot make a shechiyanu. But the answer is that it's not done. But these are not two of the same shechiyanus. A pre chadash, one's making al simcha. Al simcha, it's only the simcha is only the first instant. But the Yom Tov is really a different word. The Yom Tov, the word is al kedushas hayom. You're recognizing the day with the zman, and for that, the Gemara is saying that as long as Yom Tov is here, one still could recognize it. According to Tosfos, it's even before Yom Tov. As long as, but it's a way of showing chashivas for the Yom Tov. It's not because of the simcha that the Yom Tov is here. So maybe the simcha applies the first moment and not afterwards. That's also, now just saying Pashup Shad in the Meiri. The Meiri said that there's no shechiyanu on Chanukah, there's no shechiyanu on Purim, because you only make a shechiyanu on the day that there's Kiddush. Yom Kippur deserves Kiddush, but it's too halik for Kiddush. So he said, what are you talking about? The Gemara says that Zman Mavar Chafil B'Shuk, it doesn't require Kiddush. That's Mefurish in the Gemara. But the answer is that Zman doesn't require Kiddush, but Zman is supposed to have Kiddush. It's supposed to have a kais. That's l'chatchila. And the reason why it's supposed to have a kais is because the whole concept of Zman on Yom Tov is l'kadosh es hayom b'zman. That's the whole concept. And if it's l'kadosh es hayom b'zman, so the Meiri is saying a day that doesn't require Kiddush doesn't require Shechianu. Shechianu on Yom Tov is a chashivas of the day to say that this day is special. And any day that requires Kiddush, which that's really what Kiddush is, requires Shechianu. And the day that doesn't require Kiddush doesn't require. But it's not part of Kiddush, but it's the same like Kiddush. Yom Kippur would require Kiddush, but it can't have. Shechianu, it does require. HaRav, Shechianu, it's definitely deserved. That's Pshat in the Meiri. And let's go back to the Gemara in Eruvin Daf Mem. That the Gemara in Eruvin Daf Mem says that the shaila is, do we make a bracha of Shechianu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? We don't. And the Gemara says, the Gemara brought the Rayas, he and her. Then the Gemara's maskana is that we went to Rav Chisda's house and we saw that Rav Chisda took a kais and he made a Shechianu. So we asked the kasha, we said, that l'chayra, it's no raya. We all knew that we may make a Shechianu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, no worse than kracharata, not worse than a new fruit. And the shaila was if one must, and what's the raya from Rav Chisda? But the pshat in the Gemara is like this. The Gemara says that Rav Chisda, they saw that he came to Rav Chisda's house, and Aisule Kasa the Chamra Kodesh V'Amar. They brought him a kais of wine, and he made Kiddush, and he said Zman. So the Gemara, what the Gemara is, and one could question this, but what I'm saying is the Gemara is explaining is that the fact that he made his man by Kiddush, that shows that he held it as part of Kiddush. That means if the Shechiyanu would be like kracharata, he wouldn't make a dafka on Kiddush. There would have no shaykhs or kais, just like we're not mahader to make a Shechiyanu on anything else on dafka with a kais. The fact that he was mahader, that he said the Shechiyanu on the kais, that was a raya that he held that the Shechiyanu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is not Pri Chadash. Shechiyanu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur is out the Yom, and it's like all the Yom Tovim, and that's the Gemara's raya. That's the Gemara's raya. And I'll just leave. So now go back. So now we're so the halacha is that the Gemara says that one does have to do it even without a kais. But the fact that the Gemara held that it's ma'akev that it should be in a kais, and the fact that l'chatchila it's supposed to be in a kais, and the fact that we try to make it in a kais, that's because it's really a different gather of Shechianu. That's the Shechianu of Yom Tovim. And I'll just leave with a hara, which is something to think about. So l'maisa halacha, based on this Gemara and based on the Meiri, that's what the Paiskim Neman, Rav Moshe is very, very stark in a few places that he one can't make a Shechianu on the Yom Tov of Chanukah or Purim. No, I'm not answering Stevie. Meiri says different things. He says different things. I'm not answering Stevie. But one could be mechanic, but the Meiri tells two. The Meiri tells two Purim Techanic. One could say, but I don't know what the Rav has in mind. But I would say that it could be that Chanukah is more of a Yom Tov than Purim, because Kavim Vasam Yom Tovim Lahal Vaydam. Mashen came Purim. The Gemara says that they weren't Makabel Yom Tov. The Gemara says they weren't Makabel. They wanted to be Misaki Yom Tov. They weren't Misaki Yom Tov. Mashen Chanukah, but the Meiri says, the Meiri in Megillah says that Chanukah also. He says the Meiri Megillah says that nobody thought of Chanukah making Shechianu, so Megillah also not. So that's that. But I would leave with hara. The shaila is like this: that the Gemara says that does one make a Shechianu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, or does one not? And the Gemara says, what's the big deal? We make a Shechianu on fresh fruits. So the Gemara says, yeah, if either you could, one may. The shaila is one must. Okay. So the maskana of the Gemara is that one must make a Shechianu on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur also. One must. But the shaila is on Chanukah and Purim, maybe one still may make a Shechianu. Because I know a kracharata nami mavachina. That means the Gemara says Chanukah and Purim. Why is it worse than Pri Chadash? Even though it's not a regal, but why is it worse than Pri Chadash? So the shaila is so the Gemara says that on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. So the shaila is that Chanukah and Purim also. Maybe there's no chiyuv, but is there an eser? Why is it worse than Pri Chadash? Something to think about.